Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and for those who are familiar with the series, welcome back. This is my reading week from the 26th until the 31st of January. This was my self-imposed Read My Kindle week for the month of January and I loved it. It was really good fun and I got through a stack of books, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And I am going to do this again next month, but I did want to let you know that I'm going to have an announcement video coming out very soon. I'm going to change up how I do my Read My Kindle week, and if you're interested in participating, you can, and it's going to happen every month. So stay tuned for that. The video will be up shortly. This week I read 10 books. All of them are adult books, but if I break it down by genre, 5 were romance, 4 were urban fantasy books, and 1 was a non-fiction book. I didn't quite complete the challenge the way that I intended, which if you watched my video where I was talking about this particular challenge or self-imposed challenge, I was going to choose a page number, which in my case was 38, and I would read every book starting from the first book on page 38 on my Kindle and just keep reading those titles. And I did that for a little while, and then I decided that there were books that I was no longer interested in, so I actually cleared them off my Kindle, which was really good. I haven't returned them because I know that that costs the authors money. I've just removed them from my device so that I can't see them. But then I decided that there were a whole lot of books that I really got interested in reading throughout the week, so I ended up picking and choosing. So I did read everything on my Kindle except for 1 book, which was a teaching reference book, so that doesn't really count. But it was a really fun week. I read a total of 2,363 pages, and my yearly reading total is 40 books for the year so far. One of the books that I read this week does count towards my Romanceopoly challenge for 2020. I am participating in that reading challenge, so it was great to be able to tick off one of those books this week as well. Because there are so many books, I'm going to be super brief about them, and in fact some of them were just okay reads anyway, so I don't have a lot to say about them. They don't really stick in my head, but there are some that I really loved and I look forward to talking about them. The first book that I read this week was Royal Player by Katie McCoy. This was a 2017 release on Kindle. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It is a royalty romance story. We follow the main character Emmy, who is an American girl who has traveled overseas to England with one of her best friends, and they are planning on doing a little bit of traveling, but first they are doing some part-time work at Wimbledon in order to earn money for their travels. Emmy accidentally ends up in one of the men's change rooms at Wimbledon, and there she meets Charlie, who she doesn't recognize at first, and the two have a pretty intense encounter, and then Emmy discovers that he's actually the Prince of England, who's also a tennis player, and the spare heir, and he basically plays tennis because it pisses his family off. So this is not only a royalty romance but a sports romance, and it was kind of fun and cute and adorable, and all the sorts of miscommunication tropes go on, and people find out secrets from Emmy's past and the paparazzi gets involved, and it's that kind of story. But it was an entertaining afternoon read, and it was nice to read a new author. Then I read Birthright by Jessica Ruddick, which was also a 2017 release from Kindle. I gave this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. This is more a young adult paranormal / urban fantasy story. We meet Ava, who is, I think she's 17 or 18, or she could be 16, I can't remember. But she has a birthright, and she is essentially a human who can see the souls of other humans as colours around their body, and her job is to find pure white souls for the Reapers. And once she finds someone around her own age, because she can only see the souls or the auras of people her own age, she then lets the middleman know, and those people are slated to die strange deaths and then go through the process of potentially becoming angels for heaven, which is probably why I downloaded it in the first place, because it was an angel book, but there aren't really many angels in it at this point in the story. Ava's obviously very unhappy with this particular role. She doesn't like being responsible for the deaths of other people, and she decides to try and thwart the system, and it backfires on her pretty spectacularly, and it affects not only her mother but also Cole, who is a boy that she's met at her school and she has complicated feelings about, especially since she has discovered that Cole is one of the humans with a pure white aura, and she doesn't want to report him. It was okay. It was very YA. If anyone's watched my channel for a while, you know that I have been steadily moving away from reading as many YA books as I have in the past, because I don't necessarily always connect to the characters because of life experiences. So this was an entertaining read, and definitely I think teens who are into urban fantasy paranormal type stories would enjoy it, but it was just okay. For work, I also read The Teacher's Guide to Reading Conferences by Jennifer Saravallo. This is a 2019 release from Heinemann Education, and if I'm going to give it a star rating, I'm going to give it a 5 because I love Jennifer Saravallo's work. It's very easy to read and very easy to understand. This is all about the different types of reading conferences that you can have with students in order to assess where they are as a reader, but also to look at their strengths and to set goals for them to improve in the future. And I like that this came with some videos where you can actually see conferences done with students in real time in the classroom, and it puts it all into perspective. This is definitely something I'll be using with my staff because they have been asking about reading and writing conferences, and I talked about the writing conferences book about a month ago, I think. These books are great. I really love them. They're great for teachers if you're looking for something that's simple and easy to understand. Then I read Kiss of a Dragon by Alyssa Woods. This is a 2016 book from Swoon Secrets Publishing, and I think I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Yes, 3 out of 5 stars. This is a dragon shifter story, and I think it might be the second one that I've read. I actually really don't know how I feel about dragon shifter stories, so I guess I'll probably keep trying them until I find one that I really like, or eventually give up if I don't find any that I really like. It is the story of Lucian, who is one of 3 twin brothers who are dragon shifters, and Lucian's sort of the ruler of his clan of dragons, and he needs to find a mate in order to keep not only his life but also a pact that his dragon community has with the Fae. And he comes across Arabella when she's being attacked on the streets one night, and she's quite capably holding her own, but when a gun is introduced into the situation, he decides to save her, and then he discovers that he quite likes her, and he takes her back to his keep and keeps her. So questionable stuff going on here, and enlists her help in trying to find someone else as a mate for him, and then he tells her that he'll let her go when really he has no intention of doing that. It was fine. It's very much a normal urban fantasy type story that's got a fated mates trope in it. I think there are some interesting concepts for the world, but I don't know if I'll continue with the series. Then I read a novella by Ruby Dixon. This is The Mail Order Bride. Ruby Dixon wrote the Ice Planet Barbarian series, which I do really like because they're just so ridiculous. I thought this was going to be just as ridiculous. It wasn't quite as ridiculous as I thought it was going to be. I think that was probably the most disappointing part. If you're going to read alien romance stories, you really just want them to be ridiculous, or at least that's me. This was a 2017 release from Kindle. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars. It is the story of Envor, who is an alien. I can't even remember the race name. He lives alone on this sort of outer planet that is really a farming community type planet, and there are lots of them around, but the properties are quite large. He's never married. He works the property alone, but he's getting older, and he decides that he's going to order a bride so that he can have some company and also someone to help him run the farm. So his bride turns up, and she's very shy and won't show her face and all those sorts of things. And when he takes her home, he realizes that she is actually wearing a disguise, and that instead of being a woman of his race, she's actually a human. And she entered into this arrangement in order to save her life because humans are not particularly well thought of by the greater galaxy of aliens, and she needs a place to hide. Envor isn't particularly happy with this at first, but eventually the two come to an understanding, and she helps out around the place, and they eventually begin to develop feelings for each other, etc, etc. It's a alien romance story. It was fine. It was kind of sweet in a way, but yeah, probably not as ridiculous as I wanted it to be. Is it wrong that I went into a book expecting it to be absolutely ridiculous? I don't know. I read Egomaniac by Vi Keelan. I read this for the Romanceopoly challenge, The Office, which was to read an office romance or book where they work together in the same place. Either way, it fits the challenge. This was a 2017 release on Kindle. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Emery is working in her office late one night when Drew enters and scares the living daylights out of her because she believes him to be an intruder. As it turns out, she's actually the intruder and has been conned into leasing an office space that belongs to Drew while he's been on holidays. The two have sort of kind of an antagonistic beginning, and eventually Drew decides to help her out because he feels sorry for her. She's been conned out of a lot of money. She's from a country town. She's come to the city and had this happen to her, and he feels sorry. So he helps her out for a little bit and eventually offers her a small office space to use while she finds another place to work that's within her price range. They begin to understand what it is that the other does. Emery is a relationship counsellor and Drew is a divorce lawyer. So you have the two of them working out of their office, and it is delightfully fun and funny the way that they interact with each other and their views on different things. And Drew has a backstory about why he's so anti-relationship. He was married and is now divorced. And there is a whole backstory, which I think he might be one of my favourite heroes from Vi Keelan's books because I really felt for him. There's a whole lot of side plots and things like that, but overall it was just a really fun office romance, and I'm glad that I finally read it because I've had it for ages. I read Ash by Jamin Eve. This is a 2015 release from Kindle. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Our main character is Charlie. We follow her perspective through the whole book, and she lives in a world where there are humans and there are vampires, and then there are the half human, half vampire offspring of vampires and humans called the Ash. And the Ash have enhanced abilities and bloodlust just like vampires, but not quite all of the perks of being a vampire, a full-blooded vampire. In this world, traditionally, Ash are only male until Charlie discovers that she is Ash, and no one quite knows why she exists as Ash. And so she's taken into the Ash compound where she is trained. It sort of reminded me a little bit of a cross between the Hunger Games and Throne of Glass, where only a certain number of Ash will be permitted to survive the training period because of reasons. She goes through this intense sort of period of having to learn how to defend herself and then also fight to the death to maintain her life. And then there's also the ongoing investigation into why she exists and how she's connected to the vampires and who she is descended from and who her father is, because clearly something weird is going on. This was actually a lot more fun than I expected it to be and a lot more entertaining. I do like vampire books in general, and this was something that I hadn't seen before, so I'm glad that I read it. I may continue it in the future, but yeah, it was entertaining. I also read Only for a Night by Naima Simone. This is a 2016 release from Entangled Scorched. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This one was recommended a lot during Smuttathon, and it's a novella length story that follows Ryan, I think. I don't know. It's a different spelling of Ryan. And he's a former Irish gang member who's gotten out with some of his mates, and they have an aphrodisiac club that they run as well as a bar. One night while he's working, a former girlfriend of his, Harper, turns up. Their relationship ended in quite a bad way, and she ended up getting married. And when we meet Harper, we discover that there are things going on in her life. Her husband has died and she's had a miscarriage prior to that, so trigger warnings for those sorts of things going into the story. And it's left her questioning herself, and the way that her husband treated her has left her questioning who she is and the desires that she has. And she decides that she's going to try and knock it all out of her system one night by going to Ryan's club and propositioning him. And at first he says no because he's pissed off at her still, and eventually they strike up a bargain and it goes from there. So this is a very smutty story, so it's definitely not one for people who don't like descriptive sex scenes. It was really interesting. There was a lot more emotion packed into this one than I think I was expecting from the book, but it was good. I also read Iron Kissed by Patricia Briggs, which is book 3 in the Mercy Thompson series. This was published in 2008 by Ace, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I just realized I also read this for a Romanceopoly challenge. I've forgotten which one. Being book 3 in the series, we're starting to delve deeper into this world now. Mercy Thompson is a walker. She can turn into a coyote, and she lives in a world where there are different types of shifters. There are fae and there are vampires, and in the book so far we have spent a lot of time in the shifter world, we've spent some time in the vampire world, and in this book Mercy begins to learn more about the fae world through her friend Z. Z was sort of a mentor to her, and she eventually bought his garage from him and makes her living as a mechanic. He calls her in to help investigate the deaths of some fae members, and she uncovers a few things and lets him know, and then he tells her to leave because he doesn't want her involved anymore. And then the next thing we find out is that Z has been arrested for the murder of a security guard. Mercy sets out to prove his innocence because she knows that he didn't do it. And this puts her in direct opposition with a lot of sort of the big players in the fae world. There are trigger warnings for rape and abusive relationships and just people being absolutely terrible to women. It's also very gory and very bloody, especially towards the end when most of this stuff comes into play, so be aware of that going into it. The final book that I read this week was The Score by Elle Kennedy. This is book 3 in the Off Campus series. It was a 2016 release from Kindle. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoy this series. It is a new adult sports romance / hockey romance book series. I've enjoyed the books so far. All of the books follow 4 guys who live or who share a house just off campus from Briar University. In this book, we follow Dean Hayward De Laurentiis, who is a notorious playboy, and Ellie, who is the best friend and roommate of the female heroine from the first book in the series, The Deal, and That's Hannah. Ali's just had a very, very bad breakup for the 4th time with her on again, off again boyfriend, Sean, and this time she's determined that it's going to stick. She calls up Hannah and asks for her assistance because Hannah is out of town and Ali doesn't want to be in their room alone in case Sean comes around and she loses her willpower. Hannah suggests that she stay over at her boyfriend Garrett's house, and that's where Dean and all of the boys live. And when Ali turns up there, Dean is about 5 seconds away from a threesome with 2 girls who are naked in the living room, and Ali just tells him what's what, sets up shop in the house and says, I'm staying here, and Dean sends the other 2 girls packing and the 2 end up watching a movie and flirting, and then we don't see it on page, but they sleep together. And as the story progresses, we get what happened that night and the feelings that the 2 have for each other that develop over the course of the book. So while Ali is dealing with this idea that she prefers actual relationships, she doesn't really do one night stands, so this whole thing weighs on her, so she's dealing with that. But Dean is also dealing with things that happened in his past, how his reputation affects him, and also discovering that the plans that he has for his future may not necessarily be exactly what he wants to do. And there are some really cool scenes where Dean is actually coaching a middle school hockey team and working with the kids, and those were some of my favorite scenes because you get to see a side of this character who in past books has not necessarily been two-dimensional but hasn't really had his character developed as much, finally getting to see who he is and why he is the way he is and what potential he has. I really enjoyed this one. I enjoy the series as a whole, and there is one more book. It's Tucker's book. I'm not sure how I feel about it because there was a reveal at the end which sort of leads into Tucker's book. Not sure how I'm going to go with it, but I'm going to continue it because I have enjoyed the series so far, and I think maybe Elle Kennedy might turn my opinion around. So those are all the books that I read this week. I'm sorry this video has been really, really long. Hopefully I can edit it down a little bit. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books or if you are planning on reading them. My video that talks about how I'm going to modify and adapt this Read My Kindle challenge in February is coming around the 8th of February, so stay tuned for that. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.